Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the entire history of medieval England. But imagine this in 410 AD, the mighty Roman Empire, which had ruled Britain for nearly 4 centuries, suddenly packs up and leaves, abandoning an island of over 1 million souls to fend for themselves. Did you know that's like the population of modern-day San Diego just vanishing overnight, leaving behind empty highways and crumbling malls? What if you were one of those left behind, feeling the Empire's grip slip away like a bad breakup, wondering if the gods themselves had turned their backs, or picture the shock: no more aqueducts pumping clean water, no legions to keep the peace historians still argue whether this was a strategic retreat or a panicked flight from barbarian hordes pounding at the gates. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand there in the fading twilight of 410 AD, your boots sinking into the muddy ground outside a once mighty Roman fort along the Saxon shore, the kind of place where legionaries used to strut like they owned the world. But now the walls crack like old skin, weeds pushing through the stones as if nature itself is reclaiming what was stolen. The icy wind whips across your face, carrying the faint metallic tang of rust from abandoned helmets, scattered like forgotten toys, and you shiver, pulling your coarse wool cloak tighter. Wet wool, always that damp, clinging fabric that never quite dries in this miserable British drizzle, weighing on your shoulders worse than a bad debt in today's credit card era. Your fingers, numb from the cold, trace the graffiti etched into the stone by bored soldiers long gone, Ave Caesar, fading into oblivion. A sarcastic reminder that even empires built on blood and marble crumble like overrated tech startups that promise the moon but deliver bankruptcy. What hits you first is the eerie silence. No more trumpet calls echoing orders, no clatter of chariots on the straight Roman roads that now stretch empty toward the horizon, cracked and overgrown, like veins in a dying body. You feel it in your gut, that creeping abandonment, a psychological chill deeper than the wind, as if the gods have whispered, "You're on your own now." And historians still debate whether Emperor Honorius really sent that infamous letter telling the Britons to look to their own defences, or if it was just a bureaucratic shrug from a crumbling Rome, too busy with its own fires to care about this foggy outpost. An absurd tidbit floats through your mind: these Romans left behind hypocaust heating systems under villa floors, warm air ducts that once made winters bearable, but now they're just hollow echoes, cold as a ghost's breath, mocking the luxury that vanished overnight. You wander into the fort's ruins, your torchlight flickering orange flames that dance like uneasy spirits, casting long shadows on the walls, illuminating faded mosaics of gods and emperors who stare back with empty eyes, and you taste iron on your teeth from biting down on anxiety. That metallic bite reminding you of chewing on foil wrappers from modern candy bars during a stressful Zoom call. The physical ache sets in as you crouch by a crumbling altar, your knees protesting against the hard, uneven ground, pain shooting up like a reminder of how fragile human plans are. One moment you're part of the greatest empire the world has known, the next you're scavenging for scraps in the dark, empathy washing over you for those Romano Britons who must have felt this same dread, their world fracturing like glass underfoot. Suddenly, a rustle in the underbrush makes your heart pound. A wild animal, perhaps, or the first scout from those restless tribes across the North Sea, and you freeze, the torch sputtering in the wind, its light mutating into grotesque shapes on the walls. Zoom out for a moment and see the island as a vast, vulnerable canvas, rivers like veins pulsing with uncertainty, hills hiding secrets of ancient hill forts where Celtic holdouts whisper of resistance. But sarcasm creeps in. Oh, sure. Rome built baths and roads that lasted centuries, yet couldn't stick around for the after-party, leaving you to deal with the hangover of chaos, worse than waking up after a wild night out with no Uber in sight. The shocking element hits as you realise the scale over 400 years of Roman rule, with cities like Londinium bustling with 60,000 people, now teetering on collapse, villas abandoned mid-meal, wine amphorae shattered, and sad tales of families fleeing westward to Wales, carrying flickering Christian flames while pagan shadows lengthen. You press on, the wet wool chafing your skin now, a recurring itch that promises more discomfort ahead, and you question if this void will birth heroes or monsters. The debate raging in scholarly circles about whether the Dark Ages were truly dark or just misunderstood, like labeling a power outage as the end of civilization when it's really a chance to stargaze. Your breath fogs in the air, mingling with the musty scent of decay from rotting timber barracks, and you feel a deep empathy for those who stood here before, their lives upended by distant decisions in Rome's marble halls, where emperors like Honorius prioritized pet chickens over provincial pleas. Yes, he famously had a chicken named Roma, feeding it while the real Rome burned, a tidbit as absurd as modern politicians tweeting while crises unfold. The wind howls louder, carrying distant echoes of waves crashing on the shore, where Saxon longships might already lurk, and you hunker down, the numbness in your fingers spreading like doubt, wondering if survival means clinging to Roman ghosts or forging something raw and new. As night deepens, the torchlight wanes, mutating into feeble glimmers that barely pierce the gloom, leaving you alone with the strange visual of stars wheeling overhead, indifferent to human folly. A chill settling in your bones that asks, what lurks in the fog beyond these walls? You grip a rusted blade tighter as the crashing waves roar closer, their salty foam spraying across your face like a slap from an indifferent sea god. Did you know that in the 5th century, entire tribes like the Angles and Saxons crossed the North Sea in flimsy wooden boats, driven by floods and famine back home, turning your island into a battleground where over 200,000 migrants reshaped the land forever? Historians still arguing if it was a violent invasion or a slow, messy migration like refugees fleeing climate disasters today. The bitter iron of fear coats your tongue now, not just from the blade you lick nervously, but from the taste of impending doom, as fur-clad warriors emerge from the mist-shrouded horizon, their longships slicing through the surf like predatory shadows, oars dipping in rhythmic thuds that echo your pounding heart, and you feel the wet wool of your tunic clinging heavier, sodden from the spray, mutating from a mere discomfort into a smothering weight that chafes your skin raw, reminding you of wearing a soaked hoodie after getting caught in a modern downpour without an umbrella. Only this is no quick dash home, but a lifetime of damp misery. You scramble up the pebbled beach, your feet slipping on slick rocks that bruise your soles, pain shooting up like electric jolts, the physical scramble turning desperate as shouts in guttural tongues pierce the air, languages that will one day birth your own English words, twisted from old Germanic roots, a factual irony that these invaders carry the seeds of your future culture even as they brandish axes gleaming under the pale sun. The injustice stings sharper than the cold sea spray lashing your eyes, blurring your vision as you realize these newcomers aren't mindless barbarians, but families pushed by their own hardships. Population pressures in Scandinavia forcing them out like overbooked flights dumping passengers mid-journey. Yet here you are, a Romano Briton clinging to fading Latin customs, your villa's hypocauste floors growing cold without Roman engineers, and you wonder with a sarcastic twist if this is history's way of upgrading the software. Wiping out the old OS for something more rugged, a warrior lunges from the waves, his beard crusted with salt, eyes wild with the hunger of conquest, and you swing your blade clumsily, the clash sending vibrations up your arm that ache like a bad workout. But he parries easily, his fur cloak shedding water like disdain, and you dodge back, heart racing, the sensory struggle intensifying as sand grits between your toes, embedding like tiny accusations of your vulnerability. Deeper empathy wells up for your kin fleeing westward to the hills of Wales, carrying tales of Arthur, that legendary warlord who might have been real or just a composite myth, scholars debating if he was a Roman holdout or a Celtic chieftain, his sword Excalibur perhaps no more than a symbol of resistance against this very tide. You hear the absurd tidbit in your mind: these Saxon settlers sometimes used pig bladders inflated as flotation devices for their crossings, bobbing across treacherous waters like macabre balloons, a fact as ridiculous as using pool noodles in a hurricane. The fight escalates, more boats grinding onto the shore, disgorging men with shields painted in fierce animal motifs, wolves and ravens that snarl silently, and you retreat toward the dunes, your breath ragged, the torchlight from last night's vigil now a distant memory, mutated here into the glare of sunlight off wet blades, casting erratic flashes that disorient you further. One of them grabs your arm, his grip like iron clamps, pain blooming as he twists, forcing you to drop the weapon, and you taste blood from biting your lip. The shocking element hitting as villages burn in the distance, smoke rising like funeral pyres for the old world, sad families scattering like leaves in autumn wind, their cries lost to the gulls' mocking calls. Sarcasm bubbles up amid the chaos. Oh, great. Another upgrade to the neighbourhood. Trading Roman baths for mead halls where hygiene is optional. Worse than moving into a fixer-upper with leaky roofs and aggressive new neighbours blasting music at all hours. You break free, stumbling inland, the wet wool chafing worse now, evolving into blisters that promise infection in this pre-antibiotic hell. And you zoom out for a poetic breath, seeing the coastline as a ragged scar where two worlds collide. The sea a merciless mediator swallowing the weak while birthing uneasy alliances. The warriors pursue, their boots pounding the earth like drums of fate, and you hide behind a driftwood pile, panting, the injustice of it all prickling like nettles. Why must progress always come wrapped in violence? Historians pondering if this migration period was less conquest and more a desperate reshuffle of Europe's deck, much like today's global shifts driven by wars and warming climates. A child among the invaders catches your eye, wide-eyed and clutching a wooden doll, a humanizing twist that stirs deep empathy, reminding you these barbarians are just people seeking better lands, their gods like Woden and Thunor no stranger than your fading Christian crosses. But the chase resumes, spears whistling past, one grazing your shoulder with a hot sting that mutates the iron tang into real blood, and you run toward the forest's edge, legs burning from exertion, the physical event culminating in a desperate leap over a stream, cold water splashing up to soak you anew. The modern comparison flashes it's like being evicted from your apartment by a corporate landlord who then rents it to rowdy influencers, leaving you homeless in your own backyard. As you vanish into the trees, the shouts fade, but the fear lingers, a psychological chill settling deeper than the encroaching dusk. Your mind racing with questions of what new horrors these shores will birth, the fog rolling in like a veil over unspoken pacts. You huddle by flickering candlelight in a damp stone cell deep within the misty cloisters of a Northumbrian monastery, the flames sputtering like a dying breath against the relentless chill seeping through the walls. Did you know that in the 7th century, Irish monks preserved half the world's known classical texts in these isolated outposts, copying them by hand while Europe descended into chaos? Historians still debating if this Celtic Christianity was a pure flame of devotion or a rebellious twist on Roman orthodoxy, like indie filmmakers reimagining Hollywood blockbusters with their own quirky flair. The musty ink fills your nostrils, thick and earthy, clinging to your fingers as you trace the vellum pages under the monk's guidance, your skin prickling from the cold that never quite leaves these granite halls, wet wool of your habit mutated now from seaside drench to the perpetual damp of fog-shrouded islands hanging heavy and mildewed, chafing at your neck like a persistent itch you can't scratch, worse than wearing a soggy sweater after a rainy hike with no dryer in sight, the fabric absorbing the perpetual moisture that drips from arched ceilings carved by hands long turned to dust. Your knees ache deeply, bruised from hours of kneeling on the unforgiving flagstones during Vespers, pain radiating up your thighs like a slow burn, the physical devotion turning into a struggle that tests your resolve as chants rise around you, low and resonant, echoing off the walls in Latin phrases that blend with Gaelic inflections, creating a harmony that's both soothing and unsettling, as if the very air doubts the unity of faith. A monk named Aidan, with his weathered face and eyes like storm clouds, leans in to explain the Easter calculations, his breath warm against the cold, factual moment slipping in, as he describes how Celtic traditions set the holy day by lunar cycles tied to ancient druidic customs, while Roman envoys demand alignment with Peter's seat in distant Italy, a debate that simmers like unspoken heresy, scholars arguing whether the Synod of Whitby in 1664 was a triumph of organisation or a cultural erasure, much like modern debates over standardising time zones versus honouring local rhythms. The absurdity hits you as he mentions monks using quills dipped in ink made from crushed oak galls and iron salts, sometimes adding bizarre ingredients like urine for better adhesion. A tidbit as gross as it is fascinating, turning scripture into something alchemical and faintly foul-smelling. You shift on your sore knees, the iron tang returning to your teeth from clenching against the discomfort, mutated here into the faint metallic bite of communion wafers, baked with traces of forge ash from the blacksmith's hearth nearby. And sarcasm whispers in your mind, perfect, trading pagan gods for a bureaucracy of saints, where arguing over calendar dates feels more like office politics than divine revelation. Worse than endless Zoom meetings about daylight savings time that leave everyone exhausted and divided, the shocking element unfolds as a vision grips you, a Romano-Briton refugee from the eastern shores. Perhaps one you glimpsed fleeing Saxon blades in those chaotic landings, now seeking solace here, their eyes haunted by lost villas and crucified saviours, sad tears mixing with the ink as they copy gospels that promise eternity while their world crumbles. Empathy flooding you for these souls caught between old gods like Thuna thundering in the storms outside and the new cross rising from the mist. You join the chant, your voice cracking at first, the physical event building as the abbot calls for a procession through the cloisters. Torchlight now, candle flames dancing in iron holders, casting elongated shadows that twist like doubting serpents on the walls. The group moving in solemn steps, your bruised knees protesting each genuflection at altars adorned with Celtic knots, intertwined with Roman crosses. A surprising twist revisiting those early invaders, one monk, descended from Saxon blood, shares how his ancestors once worshipped Woden in sacred groves, now felled for these stone sanctuaries, their axes repurposed for carving crucifixes, an ironic flip where conquerors become the converted, like former bullies joining the debate club and preaching peace. The sensory struggle intensifies as fog rolls in through open arches, dampening the air further, your wet wool steaming slightly in the candle warmth, creating a haze that blurs the lines between prayer and hallucination, and you zoom out poetically, envisioning the island as a patchwork quilt of flickering lights, monasteries like Lindisfarne and Iona dotting the landscape, threads of faith weaving through the barbaric tapestry, a fragile glow against the encroaching night. Deep empathy stirs for the novices around you, some barely teens, their hands calloused from quill and plough, dreaming of heavenly rewards while earthly hunger gnaws, a sad undercurrent to the chants that promise salvation but deliver only more kneeling on cold stone. Sarcasm slips in again. Sure, enlightenment sounds grand until you're transcribing Virgil by candlelight, eyes straining like staring at a phone screen in the dark, risking medieval eye strain without the luxury of blue light filters. The procession circles back to the cell, candles guttering low, their light mutating into feeble pools that barely hold back the darkness pressing in. And you settle onto a straw pallet, the musty scent intensifying as exhaustion pulls at you. But a psychological chill lingers. What if these whispers of faith are just echoes in the void, masking deeper doubts that rumble like distant thunder? You bolt awake to the acrid smoke of burning thatch choking your lungs like a toxic fog. Did you know that on June 8th, 793, Viking raiders struck Lindisfarne Monastery with such sudden fury that it shocked all of Christendom, slaughtering monks and looting treasures in what chroniclers called the first thunderclap of the Viking Age? Historians still arguing whether this was pure piracy or a calculated strike against soft targets loaded with silver. Like modern hackers targeting unsecured bank apps for quick cash grabs, your throat burns raw from instinctive cries that tear out before you're fully conscious, the smoke stinging your eyes and coating your tongue with a bitter, ashy residue that mutates the familiar iron tang into something fouler, like biting down on charred embers mixed with the metallic bite of fear sweat. And you scramble from your straw pallet in the monastery's guest quarters, the damp stone floor icy under your bare feet, sending shocks of cold up your legs that mingle with the growing heat from flames licking the wooden beams overhead. The wet wool of your borrowed habit, still clammy from yesterday's fog, clings to your skin like a second, suffocating layer, now absorbing the soot and heat, mutating into a steaming shroud that chafes and burns where it rubs against fresh scrapes from your frantic crawl, worse than wearing a polyester shirt during a humid summer blackout. When the AC fails and everything sticks in miserable discomfort, chaos erupts around you as bells clang wildly, not in prayer but in alarm, the physical event exploding as dragon-proud ships long, Sleek vessels with carved serpent heads snarling from the bows grind onto the rocky shore visible through the narrow window slit, their sails furled like folded wings. Disgorging warriors in mail shirts and helmets topped with nasal guards, axes and swords glinting in the dawn light that filters through the haze. You dash into the cloister, heart hammering, the sensory struggle intensifying as panic's filth coats your skin, sweat mixing with grime and smoke into a greasy film that slides down your back, making every movement slick and unsteady, your breaths coming in ragged gasps that scrape your raw throat further, empathy surging for the monks you befriended just hours ago, their faces now twisted in terror as they clutch illuminated manuscripts to their chests. Sad figures who devoted lives to copying fragile knowledge only to see it threatened by this barbaric storm. One raider bursts through the gate, his beard braided and crusted with sea salt, eyes gleaming with the thrill of plunder, and you grab a nearby iron candlestick torchlight mutated here into the wild blaze of torched roofs casting erratic, hellish glows and swing it wildly, the clang against his shield vibrating up your arm like a jolt from a faulty outlet, pain blooming in your shoulder as he shoves you back, the force sending you sprawling into a puddle of spilled holy water mixed with blood from a fallen brother. The shocking element hitting as you realize these Vikings aren't mindless destroyers, but strategic predators, targeting monasteries for their hordes of silver chalices and jeweled crosses, a factual raid that desecrated the very heart of Northumbrian faith. Scholars debating if their motives were economic desperation from overpopulated fjords or a clash of pagan gods against the Christian cross. Much like today's resource wars disguised as cultural conflicts, sarcasm creeps in amid the frenzy. Oh, brilliant. Trading serene chance for this fiery house party where the guests arrive uninvited and leave with all your valuables. Worse than a Black Friday stampede at a discount store. Everyone grabbing what they can while the shelves burn. You roll away, dodging a swinging axe that embeds in the wooden doorframe with a thud that echoes your terror, and crawl toward the scriptorium, where Aidan the monk from your earlier vigils. Now, with a surprising twist as he reveals a hidden dagger under his robes, whispering he's no stranger to violence from his pre-vows days as a warrior's son joins you, his hands steady despite the fear in his eyes. The two of you barricading the door with heavy oak benches that splinter under pounding fists outside. The absurd tidbit flashes through your mind these Vikings sometimes navigated by releasing ravens from their ships, following the birds to land like ancient GPS, a fact as quirky as using carrier pigeons in a world before satellites, their black wings now seeming ominous against the smoke-filled sky. Flames roar higher, the heat warping the air, mutating candle flames from gentle flickers into devouring infernos that consume vellum pages curling black at the edges, and you cough violently, throat ablaze, as Aidan pulls you toward a secret passage behind an altar, the stone grinding open with a groan that masks the screams outside. Empathy deepening for the novices left behind, their young lives snuffed like candles in a gale, a sad waste in this era where knowledge was as precious as gold yet guarded by the defenseless. You squeeze through the narrow tunnel, the walls pressing close, damp and slimy with moss that slicks your palms, the wet wool steaming in the confined space, chafing worse as you scrape against jagged rock, pain lancing through your elbows like reminders of fragility in this survival horror. Zoom out poetically and envision the island as a besieged beacon, holy isles like Lindisfarne, dots of light, now engulfed in smoke signals of warning, threads of faith fraying under the axe of change, a fragile web stretched across stormy seas. The raiders' shouts fade behind you, but the filth of panic lingers, coating your thoughts like unwashed regret, sarcasm biting once more. Escape feels grand until you realize you're just delaying the inevitable, like hitting snooze on an alarm during a house fire. Emerging into the fog-shrouded moors, the air cooler but heavy with the scent of charred wood drifting on the wind. You glance back at the blazing monastery, its towers silhouetted against the flames like accusing fingers. A psychological chill settling as you ponder if this raid is the end of sanctuary or the spark of something fiercer, the mist swirling around you like unanswered prayers. You slosh through reeking marshes that swallow your every step like a living grave. Did you know that in the winter of 878, King Alfred the Great hid in the Somerset levels for months after a devastating Viking surprise attack? turning a king into a marshland ghost while rebuilding his shattered forces. Historians still debating if this exile was a stroke of genius or sheer desperation. Like a CEO hiding in a basement after a corporate takeover gone wrong, plotting a comeback with nothing but grit and bad coffee. The mud sucks at your boots with a wet, insistent pull, each lift requiring a grunt of effort that strains your thighs, the filth oozing between your toes in cold, slimy bursts that mutate the familiar wet wool of your tattered cloak now caked with swamp muck and Viking ash. From the raid, you barely escaped into a heavy, rotting second skin that clings and chafes your calves raw, blisters forming like accusing welts, worse than trudging through a flooded festival grounds in ill-fitting rain boots that rub you wrong with every squelch, the sensory struggle amplifying as hunger gnaws at your insides, a hollow ache that twists your gut like a forgotten sin resurfacing, your stomach rumbling in protest against the meagre berries you've scavenged, tart and unripe, staining your fingers purple and leaving a bitter aftertaste that mingles with the iron on your teeth, now mutated from the metallic tang of fear into the rusty bite of blood from a split lip you got scrambling through that monastery tunnel. The escape from Lindisfarne's flames still haunting your breaths. You glance at the fugitive king beside you, Alfred, his once regal frame gaunt under a hooded cloak, eyes shadowed by defeat yet flickering with that defiant spark. A surprising twist as he confides he's no stranger to hardship, having suffered childhood illnesses that left him frail. Scholars pondering if his chronic pains fueled his legendary reforms, or were just the era's cruel lottery, like living with undiagnosed IBS in a time before Pepto-Bismol. The physical event unfolds as you push deeper into the Athelney swamps, reeds whipping your face in stinging lashes, the water rising to your knees in icy surges that numb your legs, forcing you to link arms with Alfred and a handful of loyal thanes, their whispers of rebellion cutting through the fog like knives, planning beacons to rally scattered forces while evading Viking patrols whose distant horns echo like mocking laughter across the murk. Sarcasm bubbles up in your mind amid the misery. Oh, splendid. Trading monastery candles for this soggy hellhole, where the only light is the pale moon filtering through mist, mutating Torchlight's memory into ghostly will-o'-the-wisps that dance deceitfully ahead, leading fools astray much like viral TikTok trends promising quick fixes but delivering only disappointment. An absurd tidbit crosses your thoughts as Alfred shares a hushed tale locals here once used eel traps woven from willow, slippery creatures that sustained exiles, but in desperation, men boiled their leather belts for soup, a fact as grimly fascinating as eating ramen packets raw during a power outage because the stove's out. The shocking element strikes when a thane collapses nearby, feverish from a festering wound inflicted during the Chippenham route, his moans low and pitiful, sad empathy washing over you for this man who left a family behind, dreaming of hearths now occupied by Danish settlers, his life ebbing in the cold like so many unnamed souls lost to history's footnotes. You help prop him up, the group halting under a cluster of twisted alders, their roots like gnarled fingers clutching the earth, and Alfred kneels to administer a crude poultice of marsh herbs, his hands steady despite the tremble in his voice as he recites psalms mixed with Saxon oaths, a factual moment revealing how his scholarly bent translating Boethius later in life began in these depths, blending Christian mercy with pagan resilience, debates raging among experts if this fusion saved England or merely delayed its fall, akin to modern leaders quoting ancient philosophers during crises to sound profound while scrambling for solutions. The hunger deepens, gnawing sharper as dusk falls, your vision blurring from weakness, and you share a meagre fish caught in the shallows, its scales slimy under your fingers, the raw flesh sliding down your throat in chewy, fishy gulps that do little to fill the void, pain from your chafed skin flaring with every shift. Zoom out poetically, and behold the marshes as a labyrinthine womb of rebirth, endless pools reflecting fractured stars, a microcosm where kings become beggars, and beggars dream of crowns, threads of defiance weaving through the reeds like invisible veins pulsing with quiet fury. Deep empathy stirs for Alfred's companions, some barely older than boys, their faces dirt-streaked and hollow-eyed, whispering of lost homes while clutching crude spears fashioned from branches, a sad undercurrent to their vows of vengeance that promise more blood in this cycle of conquest. Sarcasm slips in once more, sure. Nothing says royal comeback like dining on pond scum and plotting world domination from a bog. Worse than brainstorming a startup in a garage flooded with sewage, ideas bubbling up amid the stench. The group presses on as night thickens, the mud suck mutating into a rhythmic slurp that sinks with your laboured breaths. Torchlight absent here but replaced by bioluminescent glows from decaying vegetation. Eerie greens that cast sickly hues on Alfred's determined face, and you feel a psychological chill deepen. What if this rebirth demands more than whispers? The swamps hiding not just kings but the ghosts of failures past. Their silent stares questioning if defiance is worth the endless ache. You hammer oaths under Torchlight's wavering glow in a flame-lit hall that reeks of smoke and fresh-forged iron. Did you know that, by the late 9th century, Alfred the Great's burr system turned isolated Saxon settlements into fortified towns housing thousands, blending military might with economic revival? Historians still arguing whether this was a blueprint for modern urban planning or just a frantic bid to stave off Viking annihilation. Like throwing up emergency barriers during a zombie apocalypse only to discover they spark a real estate boom. Sweat beads on your forehead, mixing with the metallic tang of new laws being etched into your mind as scribes scratch quills across parchment, the air thick with the scent of burning tallow from torches mounted in iron brackets that cast jittery shadows across the timber walls. Your wet wool tunic mutated now from marshland soak to a sweat-drenched armour of its own, heavy with the residue of swamp mud and hall's humid press clinging to your back in sticky folds that chafe your skin into raw patches. Blisters popping with each shift as you stand among the thanes, the sensory struggle building as the heat from the central hearth warps the air, making your eyes water and your throat tighten around that persistent iron on your teeth. Now evolved from blood's bite into the acrid flavour of oath-bound promises sealed with rings dipped in forge fire. Worse than signing a non-disclosure agreement at a corporate retreat where the fine print hides soul-crushing clauses amid team-building bonfires, the physical event surges as Alfred, revisited from those swampy depths with a surprising twist, his frail body now radiating quiet authority. His chronic pains hidden behind a steely gaze that commands the room calls you forward to swear fealty. His hand clasping yours in a grip that's firm yet trembling slightly. The king revealing he's translated key texts himself during sleepless nights, turning personal torment into tools for unity, a factual moment where his doom book compiles laws from all Saxon kingdoms, emphasizing mercy over vengeance, debates raging among scholars if this code was revolutionary justice or clever propaganda to bind fractured loyalties, akin to modern constitutions that promise equality while papering over deep divides. You kneel before the hearth, the flames licking higher as oaths echo around you, pain shooting through your knees from the hard-packed earth floor, scattered with rushes that prick like accusations. The hall's oppressive dimness closing in as torchlight mutates into elongated flickers that dance like uneasy alliances on the faces of gathered warriors, some Viking converts with braided beards and fresh baptism scars. Their presence a shocking element as Guthrum, the once fierce leader, now Alfred's godson after Eddington's bloody clash, stands nearby, his eyes shadowed with reluctant peace, sad empathy stirring for these former enemies who traded longships for land grants, their families uprooted from Danish shores only to find uneasy welcome here, a human cost buried under the weight of forged pacts. Sarcasm whispers through your thoughts amid the solemnity. Oh, marvellous, hammering unity from the anvil of defeat, where old grudges fester like untreated wounds in this dim air, worse than patching up a toxic friendship with group therapy sessions that end in awkward hugs and lingering resentments. An absurd tidbit surfaces as a scribe mentions how some burrs were planned with grid streets inspired by Roman ruins, yet defended by walls topped with sharpened stakes once used for pagan sacrifices. A quirky fusion of old and new that turns fortresses into living contradictions, like recycling ancient tech in a steampunk gadget that half works and half haunts. The oaths build to a crescendo, your voice joining the chorus vowing loyalty to crown and code, sweat dripping into your eyes as the heat intensifies, the iron tang sharpening with each word, empathy deepening for the common folk outside these halls, peasants whose lives these laws claim to protect yet often burden with taxes and levies, their sad plights whispered in the rushes underfoot, stories of families torn by Viking raids now bound by Alfred's vision, that promises protection but demands endless toil. You rise, legs wobbling from the kneel, the hall spinning slightly from hunger and heat, a modern comparison flashing. It's like attending a startup pitch where the CEO sells dreams of innovation. But the fine print means overtime without pay, all while the air conditioner fails and everyone sweats through their suits. The king nods approval, his twist of fate evident in how swamp exile honed him into this architect of renewal, turning personal frailty into national strength, and you step back into the throng, the torchlight waning as evening deepens, mutating shadows into longer, more insidious forms that creep along the walls like unspoken doubts about these fragile bonds. Zoom out poetically, and behold the burr as a glowing ember in the Saxon night, rings of earthworks encircling halls where laws take shape like forged blades, a microcosm of an island knitting its wounds, threads of allegiance weaving through the smoke toward an uncertain dawn. The air grows heavier with the scent of cooling metal from the nearby smithy, where hammers still ring out oaths in rhythmic clangs. Sarcasm biting once more, unity sounds poetic until you realize it's built on compromises that chafe like ill-fitted chains, leaving scars that time might heal or infect. As the assembly disperses, you linger by the hearth, the flames subsiding into embers that pulse like hidden heartbeats, the oppressive dimness pressing closer, a psychological chill seeping in. What if these new laws, sharp as they are, cut both ways, forging peace or merely delaying the festering grudges that lurk in the shadows? You sail turbulent waters under a conqueror's banner that snaps like a whip in the gale. Did you know that by the early 11th century, Danish kings like Svein Forkbeard launched raids so relentless they extracted over £200,000 of silver in Dungeld tribute from England, a fortune equivalent to billions today? Historians still debating if this was extortionate piracy or a savvy economic strategy that funded Viking empires, like ransomware hackers demanding crypto payoffs while claiming it's just business. Sea spray lashes your face in stinging bursts, salt crusting your lips and eyelids, the wet wool of your sailor's cloak mutated now from Hall's sweaty press into a sodden barrier against the North Sea's fury, heavy with brine that soaks through to your skin, chafing your neck and shoulders into raw, weeping sores that burn with each heave of the ship, the fabric clinging like a parasitic lover you can't shake. Worse than wearing a drenched parka on a stormy ferry ride where the waves mock your nausea with endless rocking, the sensory struggle deepening as your hands gripped the oar, splinters digging into palms already calloused from burr labours, pain flaring like electric sparks up your arms while the iron tang returns to your teeth, now mutated from oath-bound metal into the rusty bite of ship fittings corroded by salt air, your tongue tasting the ferrous edge as you bite down against the roll of the deck. The physical event crashes over you as the longship pitches violently, cresting a wave that slams down with bone-jarring force, water flooding the bilge and soaking your boots, forcing you to bail frantically with a battered helmet alongside Danish warriors whose braided beards drip seawater, their laughter booming over the storm as if the chaos is mere sport. A surprising twist revisiting Alfred's legacy, his grandson Ethelred the Unready, whose wavering counsels you now serve under duress. His name a misnomer not for cowardice but for ill-advised blunders that invited this very tide. Scholars pondering if his payments of Dungeld were pragmatic peace or foolish fuel for more raids, akin to feeding a stray cat only to have it bring its whole feral colony to your door. You spot land ahead, the English coast looming like a reluctant bride, and the ship veers toward it under Sweyn's command, his fork-bearded silhouette at the prow a shadow of conquest. The factual moment unfolding as you recall how his forces evolved from hit-and-run pillagers to organised armies claiming thrones, turning Danelaw territories into permanent holds, where Norse laws blended with Saxon customs, debates raging among experts if this cultural fusion enriched England or eroded its identity, much like immigration waves today that spark innovation amid cries of lost heritage. Sarcasm curls your lips amid the spray. Oh, delightful. Swapping Saxon kings for Danish overlords who wave the sea like a weapon, where loyalty wavers like these cursed tides, worse than pledging allegiance to a boss who flips the company script overnight, leaving you seasick from the corporate whirl. An absurd tidbit bubbles up as a crewmate jokes about Canute, Sweyn's son, who once commanded the waves to halt in a display of humility, or was it mockery proving even kings can't control the sea? a fact as ridiculous as politicians promising to fix the weather while ignoring climate reports. The shocking element surges when a storm swell nearly capsizes the vessel, men tumbling across the deck in a tangle of limbs and curses, one Viking slipping overboard with a splash that's swallowed by the roar, his sad fate a reminder of the thousands lost to these crossings, empathy flooding you for families back in Denmark who send sons to uncertain glory, their hearths empty while English villages burn in retaliation, the human cost of crowns shifting hands like driftwood on the current. You haul a comrade back aboard, his grip slippery with seawater, pain lancing through your shoulders from the strain, the ship righting itself as the coast nears, torchlight from signal fires on the cliffs mutating into beacons of warning rather than welcome, casting ruddy glows on the waves that dance like blood in the foam. Zoom out poetically and envision the channel as a churning forge of fates, where thrones dissolve in salt and reform in steel, an endless cycle of wavering loyalties that binds invaders and invaded in uneasy knots, threads of betrayal weaving through the spray like invisible currents pulling all under. The landing grates against shingle beaches, your boots hitting solid ground with a jolt that jars your weary bones. But the chill of betrayal deepens as you see English turncoats among the welcomers, their eyes averted in shame, sarcasm biting harder. Trust feels quaint in this game of musical crowns, where today's ally is tomorrow's executioner, leaving you to navigate the filth of politics that's stickier than any marsh mud. Deep empathy stirs for Ethelred's subjects, caught in the crossfire of royal indecision, their farms raided and taxes doubled to pay off the very raiders who return for more. A sad loop that grinds hope into dust under foreign heels. The group marches inland, the wet wool steaming in the weak sun, chafing anew as you ponder Canute's rise, his father's conquest paving the way for a king who'll rule both England and Denmark, a twist that unifies yet divides. The iron tang sharpening on your teeth as you bite into a ration of salted fish, the flavour a grim foretaste of hybrid realms to come. As night falls, campfires flicker like uneasy stars, their light mutating shadows into elongated figures that whisper of shifting allegiances, a psychological chill settling as you question if any crown can hold against the tide's relentless pull, the waves crashing endlessly behind you like unanswered accusations. You lock shields on a hill soaked in exhaustion that squelches underfoot like a sponge of blood and mud. Did you know that on October 14th, 1066, the Battle of Hastings lasted a grueling 9 hours, with Norman forces under William the Bastard clashing against Harold Godwinson's Saxon housecarls in what became the pivotal pivot of English history? Historians still debating if it was sheer luck, superior tactics, or Harold's fatigue from a prior northern march that sealed the fate, like a championship game where one team shows up jet-lagged and the underdog pulls off a Hail Mary. The ground trembles under the thunder of hooves pounding like distant drums of doom, your weary limbs quaking from the vibrations that rattle your teeth. The wet wool of your hauberk mutated now from sea-soaked voyage to a sweat and dirt-encrusted shell, stiffened by the chill autumn wind whipping across Senlac Hill, clinging to your torso in rigid folds that chafe your underarms into fiery welts, each shift sending lances of pain through your sides as if invisible thorns dig deeper with every breath, the fabric absorbing the morning dew and your own perspiration into a clammy prison that weighs you down heavier than the iron-rimmed shield strapped to your arm, worse than suiting up in a padded costume for a Renaissance fair only to get caught in a downpour that turns fun into soggy torture, the sensory struggle escalating as fatigue gnaws at your muscles like a persistent ache from hours of standing vigil, your knees buckling slightly under the strain while the iron on your teeth mutates from salty residue into the gritty bite of dust kicked up by the fray, your tongue coated with the metallic edge of impending violence that tastes like chewing on old pennies during a panic attack. The physical event erupts as the Norman cavalry charges again, their destrious hooves churning the earth into a slurry that splatters your legs, forcing you and your fellow housecarls to brace the shield wall tighter, the impact slamming into your formation like a truck hitting a barricade, wood cracking against wood in a deafening chorus that jars your spine and sends shockwaves through your shoulders, pain blooming in your wrists from the recoil as you swing your axe in a desperate arc, connecting with a knight's mount that rears with a scream, blood spraying warm and sticky across your face, the shocking element hitting as you realize Harold himself stands mere yards away. his banner of the fighting man fluttering defiantly. Yet his eyes betray the exhaustion from Stamford Bridge's recent slaughter, sad empathy surging for this king who raced south from victory, only to face fresh hell, his brothers already fallen in the north, their absence a gaping wound in the line that Vikings like those from your earlier sails would mock if they could see this Norman twist. Sarcasm flickers in your mind amid the clamour. Oh, brilliant. Trading one set of foreign overlords for another, where the Crowns game feels like musical chairs with lethal stakes. Worse than binge-watching a drama series where every season finale kills off your favourites and introduces villains who look suspiciously like the old ones in new armour. An absurd tidbit races through your thoughts as you parry a lance thrust these Normans sometimes use stirrups for stability and charges, a tech edge over your foot-bound style. Yet they once experimented with horse armour made from boiled leather stiffened with wax. A quirky innovation that turned mounts into sweaty ovens, like outfitting a car with custom rims only for them to melt in the heat of a drag race. The charge falters, knights wheeling away in feigned retreat that draws some of your eager comrades forward, breaking the wall in a fatal mistake, their shouts turning to screams as arrows rain down like deadly hail, one grazing your helmet with a whine that leaves your ears ringing, the factual moment unfolding as William lifts his helmet to rally his men, dispelling rumours of his death in a masterstroke of morale, debates among scholars if this was planned theatre or lucky improvisation that turned the tide, akin to a coach's halftime speech going viral and swinging a game's momentum in overtime. You reform the line, breath heaving in a ragged burst that scrape your raw throat, empathy deepening for the third militia beside you. Farmers pressed into service with pitchforks and scythes, their faces pale with terror yet holding firm for homes and hearths, threatened by this bastard duke's ambition. A sad undercurrent to the battle cries that mask their longing for peaceful fields, now trampled under foreign boots. The sun climbs higher, casting harsh light that mutates morning shadows into stark contrasts on bloodied grass. Your vision blurring from sweat stinging your eyes, and you zoom out poetically, envisioning the hill as a crucible of destinies, where Saxon resilience meets Norman innovation in a forge of flesh and steel, threads of history unravelling and reweaving into a tapestry stained with the colours of change, a fragile balance teetering on the edge of collapse. Deep empathy stirs for Harold as an arrow finds its mark, his body crumpling under the weight of betrayal from fate and perhaps his own oaths sworn years ago in Normandy. A twist that whispers of perjury's long shadow, his fall rippling through the ranks like a wave of despair. Sarcasm bites sharper. Now conquest sounds romantic until you're the one locked in a shield wall, dreaming of mead halls while reality serves up endless charges, leaving you battered and questioning if any banner is worth this grind. The melee intensifies, axes clashing in a frenzy that numbs your arms, the wet wool steaming from exertion and blood splatter, chafing worse as you swing wildly at a dismounted knight whose face twists in grim determination. The pain in your limbs a constant throb that promises bruises lasting weeks if you survive. As evening approaches, the field littered with the fallen, their stares vacant under the fading light. A psychological chill descends. What if this thunder of hooves heralds not just a new king, but a fracture that will echo through centuries? The hill slopes slick with a strange visual of tangled limbs and discarded weapons glinting like forgotten stars. You trudge scorched earth under a merciless sky that beats down like an unyielding hammer. Did you know that in the winter of 1069 to 1070, William the Conqueror's harrying of the north devastated Yorkshire so thoroughly that over 100,000 people starved or fled, turning a fertile region into a wasteland where no crops grew for decades? Historians still arguing if this was calculated genocide to crush rebellion or desperate overkill from a paranoid duke securing his stolen crown. Like a CEO torching factories to prevent union strikes, only to wonder why profits plummet in the aftermath. Ash fills your lungs with every laboured breath, choking you like swallowed regrets that coat your throat in gritty layers. The wet wool of your peasant's tunic mutated now from battle-soaked grime to a dust-encrusted rag, baked stiff by the sun, clinging to your ribs in flaky patches that flake off with each step, chafing your sunburnt skin into weeping cracks that sting like accusations of survival's guilt, the fabric absorbing the powdery residue of burned villages into a filthy shroud heavier than chains. Worse than hiking through a wildfire aftermath in ill-fitting gear that rubs blisters, while smoke lingers in your hair like unwanted memories. the sensory struggle mounting as your boots crunch over charred bones and cinders that shift treacherously underfoot. Pain radiating from ankles twisted on uneven ground scarred by Norman torches. The iron on your teeth mutating from salty battle residue into the ashy bite of desolation. Your tongue dry and cracked as you lick lips parched by thirst in this man-made desert, where rivers run foul with corpses. The physical event drags on as you join a ragged column of refugees fleeing northward. William's knights thundering past on patrols that scatter your group like leaves in a gale, their lances glinting cruelly as they enforce the king's wrath. One rider wheeling close enough to lash out with a whip that cracks across your back, the sting blooming into a hot welt that forces a gasp from your raw throat. Shocking element erupting as you witness a family ahead succumb to the harrying's horror, a child collapsing from starvation, too weak to cry, their tiny frame curling into the dust while parents wail in futile anguish. Sad empathy flooding you for these innocents caught in the crossfire of noble ambitions. Their lives reduced to statistics in chronicles that gloss over the human toll. A twist revisiting Harold's fall at Hastings, where his defiant stand now echoes in this systematic erasure. Scholars pondering if William's brutality was born from insecurity over his bastard birth, or a Norman tradition of terror that built empires on broken backs. Sarcasm creeps into your thoughts amid the misery. Oh, splendid. Conquering a kingdom only to salt its earth like a spiteful chef, ruining the meal for everyone. Worse than a bad breakup where one side burns all the photos and trashes the apartment just to move on, leaving nothing but ruins and resentment. An absurd tidbit flickers as a fellow refugee mutters about how Normans sometimes scattered actual salt on fields to ensure barrenness, mixing it with ploughshares turned weapons, a quirky tactic as bizarre as using weed killer on a neighbour's lawn during a property dispute, turning vengeance into ecological sabotage. His sun dips lower, casting long shadows that mutate Torchlight's distant memory. Now the glow of smouldering ruins on the horizon, into eerie red hazes that paint the landscape in blood tones, your vision blurring from dust-stung eyes as the column halts by a poisoned stream, unfit for drinking, yet the only respite, forcing you to sip cautiously, the water's foul taste twisting your gut into knots of nausea that double you over in cramps, pain lancing through your abdomen like knives forged from injustice itself. You hunker down among the displaced, sharing scraps of bread scavenged from unburned edges, the crust hard and ashy, empathy deepening for the northern earls who sparked this rebellion only to flee, leaving common folk like you to bear the brunt, their grand stands reduced to whispers of regret around dying campfires, a sad legacy where pride ignites infernos that consume the innocent. The knights return, their hooves pounding the earth in rhythmic threats that vibrate through your weary bones, one pausing to demand tribute you don't have, his boot pressing into your shoulder with bruising force that grinds ash into your skin. The physical pressure a microcosm of Norman dominance that crushes spirits as surely as it levels homes. Zoom out poetically, and behold the north as a canvas of devastation. Valleys, once green, now grey scars etched by fire's quill. Threads of survival weaving fragile paths through the waste, a testament to resilience amid ruins' vast silence. Deep empathy stirs for the wildlife fleeing too. Deer bolting from flames that devour forests, their panicked eyes mirroring your own, a sad harmony and shared displacement where even beasts suffer man's folly. Sarcasm bites anew, conquest feels heroic in songs, but here it's just endless trudging through someone else's mess, leaving you parched and pondering if any crown justifies turning bread baskets into graveyards. The night deepens, stars piercing the haze like indifferent witnesses, their light mutating shadows into elongated phantoms that slink across the scorched ground, whispering of ghosts risen from the ashes, and you curl tighter against the cold seeping up from the earth, the wet wool cracking as it dries brittle, a psychological chill burrowing deeper. What if this silent wasteland is the true face of victory, a hollow echo where injustice's weight presses eternally? The horizon, a strange visual of skeletal trees silhouetted against flickering embers that dance like mocking spirits. You wander wastelands of wrath where the ground crunches like brittle bones under your blistered feet. Did you know that during the harrying of the north in 1069, William's forces razed over 100 villages and salted fields to prevent regrowth? causing a famine that killed tens of thousands in a calculated act of terror. Historians still arguing whether this was strategic pacification or outright ethnic cleansing, aimed at breaking the Anglo-Saxon spirit forever, like a colonial power scorching earth to erase resistance, only to leave ghosts that haunt the land for generations. Ash swirls into your lungs with every ragged inhale, thick and choking like swallowed lies that coat your throat in a gritty film. The wet wool of your ragged cloak mutated now from battle-drenched heaviness to a dust-laden shroud baked hard by relentless sun, clinging to your frame in flaky layers that crack and chafe your sunburnt arms into raw stripes of pain. The fabric absorbing the powdery residue of burned homes into a filthy armor that weighs on your shoulders like unearned guilt. Worse than trekking through a post-apocalyptic desert in a thrift store jacket that's seen better days. Shedding fibers with every gust that whips the desolation around you. The sensory struggle deepening as your boots sink into the ashen soil, each step pulling with a sucking resistance that strains your calves and sends jolts of ache up your spine. The iron on your teeth mutating from salty battle grit into the acrid bite of charred remnants. Your tongue tasting the ferrous edge of destruction, as if chewing on rusted nails unearthed from ruined hearths. The physical event unfolds mercilessly as you crest a low hill, once verdant but now a barren scar. Norman knights thundering past on their destriers in a patrol that kicks up clouds of dust stinging your eyes, one reining in close enough to demand your purpose here, his mailed fist gesturing with a lance that glints coldly, forcing you to mutter lies of scavenging while your heart pounds. Pain flaring in your side from a half-healed bruise from Hastings' chaos, revisited in this endless aftermath. A surprising twist as William himself appears in rumour among the riders, his bastard origins fueling a paranoia that drives this scorched policy. Scholars pondering if his illegitimate birth made him overcompensate with brutality, or if Norman upbringing in constant feuds forged him into a ruler who saw mercy as weakness. Akin to modern dictators, who raise opposition to mask their insecurities, you slip away into a hollow, the night's laughter fading like mocking echoes. But the shocking element crashes down when you stumble upon a cluster of skeletal remains, families huddled in death, their bones picked clean by crows, a child's tiny hand clutching a wooden doll half buried in ash. Sad empathy overwhelming you for these nameless victims whose only crime was loyalty to old kings, their lives extinguished in William's firestorm that spared no one, not even the innocent whose whispers seem to rise from the silent earth in accusatory silence. Sarcasm curls your cracked lips amid the desolation, conquering hero, turning bountiful north into a moonscape of misery, where victory tastes like dust and feels like walking through a failed barbecue, where everything's overcooked to oblivion, worse than a botched DIY renovation that levels the house instead of fixing the leaks, leaving you homeless in your own backyard with bills piling up like unburied dead. An absurd tidbit drifts through your haze-addled mind as you sift through ruins. Normans sometimes used urine to douse flames in their own camps, a pungent fire suppressant that left lingering stenches, a quirky detail as gross as it is practical, like using soda to extinguish a kitchen grease fire because the extinguisher's expired. The sun beats down fiercer, mutating torchlight's distant memory, now the glare of daylight on bleached bones into blinding reflections that force you to squint, your vision spotting with black flecks from dehydration that twists your gut into knots of nausea. Pain lancing through your temples like hammers forging chains of endurance. You press on toward a shattered village, the air heavy with the phantom scent of smoke long extinguished. Empathy deepening for survivors, you encounter a gaunt woman sharing a crust of mouldy bread, her eyes hollow with loss of kin to starvation's slow grip, her tale of nights salting wells to poison water supplies, a sad testament to cruelty's ingenuity that outlives the flames. The injustice's weight presses down amid the haunting quiet, your steps echoing unnaturally in the void where birds once sang but now flee the barrenness. A modern comparison flashing. It's like scrolling through a social feed after a viral scandal, where truth gets buried under layers of denial, and the innocent pay the price. Silence screaming louder than any protest. Zoom out poetically, and behold the north as a vast canvas scarred by wrath's brush. Valleys etched with fire's script in silent verses of ruin, threads of resilience fraying yet holding in the windswept ashes, a fragile elegy to what was lost in the name of crowns. Deep empathy stirs for the land itself. Fields once golden, now grey tombs where seeds refuse to sprout. A sad harmony with human suffering where even earth mourns the folly of men who wield power like torches in a tinderbox. Sarcasm bites once more. Peace through desolation sounds poetic until you're the one breathing the fallout. Lungs protesting each inhale as if history's grudges lodge there forever. Leaving you to ponder if rebuilding is possible or just another layer of lies atop the dust. The day wanes, shadows lengthening into grotesque fingers that claw the horizon, your weary body collapsing by a toppled stone cross, the wet wool cracking as it dries brittle under the cooling air, chafing anew against scars that promise infection in this pre-medicine nightmare, the silence broken only by wind's low moan like ghosts reciting forgotten names. As dusk deepens, the wasteland transforms into a sea of grey undulating in the breeze. Bones glinting faintly like misplaced stars, a psychological chill burrowing into your core. What if this haunting quiet is the true legacy of conquest? An emptiness that echoes louder than battles. The sky, a strange visual of bruised clouds gathering like unspoken storms on the edge of more wrath. You witness blades flash in cathedral gloom that swallows light like a hungry void. Did you know that on December 29th, 1170, 4 knights murdered Archbishop Thomas Becket in Canterbury Cathedral during Vespers, turning a house of God into a slaughterhouse in a clash of church and crown that shocked Europe? Historians still debating if Henry II's infamous outburst, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" was a direct order or a regrettable slip that unleashed royal fury. Like a CEO's offhand tweet sparking a corporate scandal that spirals into lawsuits and ruined careers. The coppery scent of violence mingles with incense heavy in the air, thick and cloying as it seeps into your nostrils. Your wet wool robe mutated now from northern ash dust to an incense-soaked garment dampened by the cathedral's perpetual chill, clinging to your chest in sticky folds that chafe your collarbone into irritated red lines. The fabric absorbing the humid exhalations of praying monks into a musty barrier that weighs on your frame like unspoken sins. Worse than attending a midnight mass in a drafty old church wearing a thrift store sweater that itches relentlessly under the weight of collective guilt. The sensory struggle intensifying as your knees buckle on the cold marble floor etched with centuries of pilgrim footsteps. Pain shooting through your joints like needles from hours of genuflection. The iron on your teeth mutating from ashy grit into the sharp, metallic bite of fierce sweat mixing with the tang of consecrated wine spilled in haste. Your tongue pressing against it as if tasting the forbidden fruit of betrayal. The physical event explodes in slow horror as the knights burst through the transept doors, their boots echoing like thunderclaps on the flagstones, swords drawn and glinting in the flickering candlelight from altars dedicated to saints who seem to avert their gilded eyes. You scrambling behind a pillar as Becket stands defiant at the high altar, his voice booming psalms even as the first blade swings, connecting with a sickening thud that reverberates through the vaulted ceilings. Blood spraying in warm arcs that spatter your hiding spot. The shocking element slamming home as you realize this isn't random violence, but the culmination of a feud between old friends Henry and Becket, once Chancellor and King in merry companionship, now fractured by ecclesiastical reforms that pitted papal authority against royal prerogative. Sad empathy overwhelming you for Becket, his transformation from worldly courtier to ascetic defender of the church, a tragic arc that ends in this crimson pool spreading like accusation across the sacred stones. His final words, "I am ready to die for my Lord," hanging in the air like a condemnation of worldly power's hubris. Sarcasm whispers through your terror, oh, divine justice at its finest, where arguing over who appoints bishops escalates to holy homicide, worse than a boardroom dispute over promotions turning into a literal backstabbing, leaving the office floor stained with more than just spilled coffee. An absurd tidbit flickers in your mind amid the chaos. Medieval knights sometimes confessed sins before such deeds by eating bread soaked in holy water. A quirky ritual to cleanse their souls while plotting murder. As ridiculous as chugging an energy drink before a heist to stay sharp, despite the moral hangover sure to follow. The knights hack relentlessly, their grunts mixing with the archbishop's gasps, one blade severing his scalp in a grotesque crown of thorns parody, and you press against the pillar, heart hammering so loud it drowns the distant tolling bells, empathy deepening for the monks frozen in horror, their vows of peace shattered like the stained glass window nearby that cracks under a stray swing, shards tinkling to the floor in a rainbow of fragmented light, a sad symphony where faith's guardians become witnesses to its desecration, their trembling hands clutching rosaries that offer no shield against steel. The modern comparison flashes it's like watching a viral video of a public figure's downfall, where private words ignite public outrage, spiraling into cancellation that's as bloody in reputation as this is in flesh. The crowd's gasps echoing online comments in real-time judgment. Torchlight from wall sconces mutated here from distant campfires into the guttering flames of vigil candles that cast elongated shadows, writhing like demons on the nave walls dances erratically, illuminating the knights' faces twisted in zealous rage, their armour clanking as they finish the deed, Beckett's body slumping in a heap that pools darker with each passing second, a surprising twist revisiting William the Conqueror from those harried northern wastes, his grandson Henry II inheriting that same ruthless streak but channeling it into this ecclesiastical showdown, scholars debating if Beckett's martyrdom was inevitable, or if compromise could have averted the blades, much like analysing a historical fork where one path leads to reform and the other to rivers of blood. You dare a peek? The copper scent thickening into a nauseous wave that turns your stomach, pain from your cramped hiding spot radiating through your back as stones dig in like judgmental fingers, the air growing heavier with the moans of wounded clergy rushing to the fallen prelate, their habits staining red as they cradle his head, whispering last rites in voices choked with sobs. Zoom out poetically and envision the cathedral as a wounded heart of faith, arches soaring like aspirations now bowed under the weight of sacrilege, threads of devotion fraying in the crimson spill that seeps into cracks like veins carrying poison through the body politic, a fragile sanctuary where divine and earthly powers collide in eternal friction. Deep empathy stirs for Henry far away in his Norman court, his regret perhaps dawning as news travels, a king haunted by words that slipped like daggers from his tongue, a sad irony where ambition's fire consumes the very allies it once warmed. Sarcasm bites sharper in the silence that follows the knight's retreat reconciliation through murder. How quaint, turning God's house into a crime scene where the only miracle is surviving to tell the tale, leaving you huddled in shadows that swallow secrets whole. The gloom deepens as candles sputter low, their light mutating into feeble pools that barely hold back the encroaching dark. Monks' whispers fading into prayers for the soul departed, your breath shallow against the pillar's cold embrace. A psychological chill wrapping around you like the realization that sacred spaces offer no true refuge from human wrath. The altar, a strange visual of crimson-streaked marble gleaming wetly under the dying flames, like tears frozen in eternal lament. You trudge endless dunes under a blistering heat that sears your skin like a branding iron fresh from the forge. Did you know that during the Third Crusade in 1191, Richard the Lionheart's forces endured temperatures over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, while marching 12 miles a day in full armour, losing thousands to dehydration and disease before even clashing with Saladin's armies? Historians still arguing if this holy war was a chivalric triumph or a futile ego clash that drained England's treasury like a bad gambling habit. Leaving the kingdom bankrupt for generations, sand grinds into your open sores with every laborious step, the fine grains embedding like tiny needles that inflame the raw flesh on your feet and calves. Your wet wool tunic mutated now from cathedral dampness to a sweat-soaked rag stiffened by desert dust, clinging to your torso in abrasive layers that chafe your underarms into fiery welts, the fabric absorbing the relentless perspiration into a salty crust that cracks and reforms with each movement, weighing you down heavier than the chainmail hauberk slung over your shoulder, worse than backpacking through a Saharan trek in ill-chosen cotton that turns into a portable sauna, trapping heat and friction in an endless cycle of misery, the sensory struggle amplifying as blisters burst under your sandals, oozing fluid that mixes with sand into a gritty paste squelching between your toes, pain lancing up your legs like electric currents that make you wince with every shift, the iron on your teeth mutating from blood's coppery edge into the gritty bite of wind-blown silica that coats your mouth, your tongue parched and swollen as you chew on a strip of dried meat tasting like leather forgotten in the sun. The physical event builds relentlessly as your Crusader column snakes through the dunes toward Acre's distant walls, the sun hammering down like divine wrath, forcing you to shield your eyes with a tattered scarf while Richard revisited from England's throne rooms with a surprising twist, his once boisterous Lionheart now gaunt from dysentery that plagues the camp. Whispering orders from a litter borne by exhausted squires rallies the men with promises of Jerusalem's glory, his voice hoarse yet commanding. A factual moment slipping in as you recall how this siege has dragged on for 2 years already. Saladin's forces countering with Greek fire hurled from catapults, flaming pots that explode in bursts of naphtha inferno. Debates among scholars if Richard's tactical brilliance in capturing the city was worth the 2,700 Muslim prisoners he ordered executed in retaliation. A massacre that poisoned peace talks forever, akin to modern negotiators walking away from ceasefires over unyielding demands that escalate conflicts into endless quagmires. Sarcasm curls your cracked lips amid the heat haze. Oh, holy quest indeed. Marching to reclaim a city you've never seen for a god who seems to have forgotten the air conditioning. Worse than signing up for a destination wedding in the tropics, only to find the venue's a mosquito-infested swamp with no refunds, leaving you baked and bitten while the hosts argue over vows. An absurd tidbit crosses your delirium-addled mind as a comrade mutters about knights using ostrich eggshells as canteens, hollowed out and sealed with wax to hold precious water. A quirky survival hack as odd as packing Tupperware for apocalypse, their fragile curves bouncing in saddlebags amid the jolts. The shocking element crashes down when heatstroke claims another pilgrim ahead, his body convulsing in the sand before going still, comrade stripping his armour hastily to lighten the load, sad empathy washing over you for this man who left English fields dreaming of absolution, his family back home never knowing if he reached the holy sites or perished in this god-forsaken waste. A human toll buried under banners of faith that flutter, tattered in the hot wind. You pause to sip from a dwindling waterskin, the lukewarm trickle barely quenching your thirst, pain throbbing in your temples from the glare that mutates Torchlight's memory, now the sun's unyielding blaze casting mirages of oases that tease and vanish into wavering heat, shimmers that distort the horizon, making distant Saracen scouts appear like phantoms dancing in mockery. Zoom out poetically, and behold the Holy Land as a vast furnace of faded dreams, dunes rolling like waves of forgotten prayers, threads of crusade weaving through the scorching air in patterns of ambition and atonement, a fragile pilgrimage where divine purpose frays under earthly trials. Deep empathy stirs for Saladin's forces glimpsed on ridgelines, their own hardships mirroring yours in this shared hell of sand and sun. A sad irony where enemies suffer alike under the same indifferent sky. Their curved scimitars flashing signals that promise no mercy, yet hint at mutual exhaustion. The column halts at a wadi's dry bed, Richard dismounting weakly to confer with barons, his twist of illness humanizing the legend as he coughs into a cloth stained with blood, whispering of Acre's walls breaching soon. Yet you sense the irony biting like a scorpion hidden in the sand. Glory dissolves in this vast, unforgiving emptiness, where holy wars promise salvation but deliver dysentery and doubt. Sarcasm slipping in once more as you swat at flies. Buzzing your sores, redemption sounds epic until you're paying with blisters and bad water, leaving you to question if Jerusalem's stones are worth this endless trudge. A sandstorm brews on the horizon, winds whipping grains into stinging veils that force you to hunker down, burying your face in the wet wool that smells of sweat and despair, chafing anew against your neck as you curl fetal, the pain in your feet a constant pulse that lulls you into fitful rest amid the howl. As the gale peaks, visibility drops to nothing. The world a swirling brown chaos where figures loom and fade like regrets. A psychological chill burrowing despite the heat. What if these Crusader dreams are just illusions in the sand, dissolving into irony's sting that leaves scars deeper than any scorpion's tail? The dunes a strange visual of undulating waves frozen in eternal mockery. You stand defiant in rain-soaked fields that squelch under your mud-caked boots like a quagmire of broken promises. Did you know that on June 15, 1215, King John was forced to seal Magna Carta at Runnymede after barons rebelled against his tyrannical taxes and arbitrary justice? A document with 63 clauses that limited royal power for the first time. Historians still debating if it was a revolutionary blueprint for modern rights, or just a desperate truce among elites that ignored the common folk. Like a corporate contract where executives negotiate perks while the workers foot the bill without a say. The damp chill seeps into your bones through the wet wool of your baronial surcoat, mutated now from desert sand grit to a sodden mantle, heavy with Thames mist and relentless drizzle, clinging to your shoulders in clammy folds that chafe your neck into raw irritation, the fabric absorbing the downpour into a spongy weight that drags at your every movement. Worse than showing up to an outdoor protest in a cheap raincoat that leaks at the seams, turning solidarity into a soggy endurance test where discomfort unites more than slogans ever could. The sensory struggle sharpening as rain patters endlessly on your hood, rivulets trickling down your face to mix with sweat from the tense standoff, your fingers numb and prickling as you clutch a quill near the makeshift table, where ink blurs on parchment under the persistent drops, the iron on your teeth mutating from gritty crusade residue into the inky bite of uncertainty as you bite your lip against the cold, tasting the faint metallic edge of quill tips dipped in iron gall mixture that stains your tongue like the bitter aftertaste of compromised ideals. The physical event swells in the meadow's muddy expanse as barons like you encircle the king, his face a mask of reluctant fury under a canopy that sags with water. The charter's clauses read aloud in a voice that wavers with the wind limits on scutage fees, protections against unlawful imprisonment, promises of fair trials, yet deceit slithers through the crowd like a venomous promise unkept. John's eyes darting with the cunning of a cornered fox, his seal pressed into wax with a hand that trembles not from fear but from simmering rage, the shocking element erupting when whispers spread of his secret pleas to the Pope for annulment even as the ink dries, a betrayal that turns this pact into a fragile illusion, sad empathy welling for the lesser knights and freemen around you who grasp at these words like lifelines, their families back home burdened by John's endless wars and extortions, dreaming of justice while the king's courtiers smirk in the shadows, a human cost hidden in the fine script where clauses protect baronial privileges but leave peasants to rot in the same feudal chains. Sarcasm curls in your mind amid the chill, ground-breaking liberty, where nobles force a king to play nice on paper, yet everyone knows he'll tear it up like a bad check the moment backs are turned. Worse than signing a peace treaty at a family reunion, where uncles promise to stop fighting over inheritance, only to sue each other the next day, leaving the table littered with empty vows and spilled wine. An absurd tidbit flickers as a scribe mutters about how medieval seals sometimes incorporated hairs from the king's beard for authenticity, a quirky personal touch that bound rulers to their word like DNA evidence in a medieval CSI episode. Yet here it feels as futile as fingerprinting a ghost. The rain intensifies, blurring the charter's edges as barons murmur oaths of enforcement, your fingers slipping on the damp quill as you add your mark, pain throbbing in your knuckles from the cold that seizes joints like invisible vices, the meadow turning into a slurry that sucks at your boots with each shift, forcing you to steady yourself against a sodden banner pole that sways ominously. Torchlight from nearby braziers mutated here from cathedral flickers into smoky hazes that battle the downpour, casting watery reflections on puddles that mirror distorted faces dances erratically, illuminating John's reluctant nod as he hands over the document, a surprising twist revisiting Becket's cathedral blood from those stained stones, where Henry's rage birthed this very confrontation through his son's inherited hubris. Scholars pondering if Magna Carta was Becket's posthumous victory, or just another cycle of crown church clashes that evolved into baronial checks, much like labour unions rising from workplace tragedies to demand rights from indifferent bosses. You step back into the throng, the damp chill deepening as wind gusts scatter rain like accusations, empathy surging for the absent commons whose voices echo faintly in Clause 39's promise of due process, yet remain silenced in this elite bargain, their sad plights of taxation without representation foreshadowing revolutions centuries hence. A quiet undercurrent where the meadow's mud hides bones of forgotten uprisings. The modern comparison strikes it's like crowdsourcing a constitution via social media, where influencers draft rules to curb the platform's tyranny, but the CEO smiles and plans workarounds before the post even goes viral, leaving users drenched in false hope. Zoom out poetically, and behold Runnymede as a sodden cradle of fragile freedoms, meadows blooming with tentative pacts amid the Thames' serpentine flow, threads of defiance weaving through the rain in patterns of tentative alliance. A delicate balance where words on vellum challenge steel crowns. Deep empathy stirs for John himself, a king warped by crusader debts and baronial pressures. His deceit a shield against vulnerability in a world that chews up the weak. A sad figure retreating to his tent with shoulders slumped under the deluge. His crown's lustre dimmed by the ink's blur. Sarcasm bites once more equality under law sounds noble, until the fine print favours the fine folk, leaving you standing in the muck pondering if this charter binds or merely bends. The rain easing slightly as dusk approaches, yet the chill lingers like unspoken treachery. The fields darken, puddles reflecting fractured skies like shattered mirrors of intent. Your breath fogging in the cooling air as the crowd disperses warily, a psychological chill wrapping tighter. What if these muddy packs are but illusions in the mist? Deceit slithering unseen to uncoil in darker days. The meadow, a strange visual of trampled grass etched with boot prints that fade like fleeting vows. You gasp in fetid streets choked with decay that wraps around you like invisible tendrils squeezing the life from your chest. Did you know that by 1349 the Black Death had claimed over 2 million lives in England alone, wiping out entire villages in waves of horror that left survivors questioning if God had abandoned them, or if this was nature's brutal reset button after centuries of overpopulation and filth? Historians still arguing whether the plague's rapid spread was fueled by rat fleas or airborne contagion in crowded hovels. Like a viral outbreak in a packed subway car where one cough dooms the whole ride, and no one knows who's patient zero until it's too late. The stench clings to your skin, thick and clammy like a shroud woven from rotting linen, seeping into every crease of your wet wool garments mutated now from Runnymede muddy soak to a plague-dampened rag heavy with the sweat of fear and the miasma of death, clinging to your body in sticky layers that chafe your thighs into raw patches burning with each hesitant step. The fabric absorbing the humid rot of unburied bodies piled in doorways into a foul second skin that weighs you down like chains forged from despair. Worse than stumbling through a flooded basement during a blackout where mouldy water soaks everything and the air tastes like forgotten regrets. The sensory struggle clawing deeper as your boots squelch through gutters running with black bile and waste. The slick filth seeping into cracks and coating your soles in a greasy film that makes each footfall unsteady. Pain throbbing in your arches from endless walking to avoid the quarantined zones where doors bear crude crosses painted in blood-red ochre. The iron on your teeth mutating from inky charter residue into the sour bite of vomit rising unbidden as another wave of nausea hits. Your tongue coated with the acrid tang of bile mixed with the dusty grit of abandoned streets where wind stirs ashes from hasty pyres that failed to burn clean. The physical event engulfs you as a neighbour bolts from their hovel, collapsing at your feet in a fit of coughing that sprays flecks of blood onto your hem, their body convulsing with the black swellings that bulge grotesquely under arms and neck, forcing you to kneel and cradle their head despite the risk, your hands trembling as you wipe foam from their lips, pain shooting through your knees on the uneven cobbles slick with effluent, the shocking element crashing down when they whisper of dreams, shattered a baker who once filled these lanes with the warm scent of loaves, now reduced to a rattling husk begging for mercy that no physician dares grant. Sad empathy overwhelming you for families torn asunder, children orphaned to wander like ghosts while parents swell and burst in locked rooms, their cries muffled by the tolling of church bells that ring ceaselessly for the dead until the ringers themselves fall silent. A human toll where the living envy the gone. A surprising twist revisiting John's deceitful charter from those muddy meadows. His son Henry's realm now crumbling under this invisible foe that mocks royal edicts and baronial pacts alike. Scholars pondering if the plague's indifference to rank striking kings and serfs with equal fervour was cosmic justice for feudal inequalities or just blind biology at play. Much like a lottery where wealth buys no immunity and the poor hit the jackpot of suffering first, sarcasm slithers through your haze of dread amid the clammy shadows. Oh, perfect timing for apocalypse, where the great equalizer arrives not on horseback but on rat tails, turning sinners and saints into statistics while the church peddles indulgences like snake oil salesmen, hawking cures for a storm they can't predict. worse than scrolling doomsday prepper forums during a blackout, where everyone claims secret knowledge but ends up hoarding canned goods that rot anyway, leaving you bitter at fortune's cruel twist that spares the cunning while claiming the kind. An absurd tidbit bubbles up as a passing physician, in his bird-like mask stuffed with herbs, mutters of treatments, like strapping live chickens to swollen buboes to draw out poison. A quirky folly as ridiculous as rubbing onions on your feet, to ward off colds because Grandma swore by it. Their beaked silhouettes stalking the streets like harbingers from a fever dream where science and superstition dance a macabre waltz. The streets narrow into a labyrinth of despair, the clammy air pressing closer as fog rolls in from the river, mutating torchlight from distant watchfires into hazy glows that barely pierce the gloom. Your breath shortening with paranoia that each inhale carries the invisible death, pain aching in your chest from suppressed coughs that you fear betray infection, the air heavy with the moans of the afflicted echoing from shuttered windows where families seal themselves in voluntary tombs. You duck into an abandoned tavern for shelter, leaning against a bar sticky with spilled ale now fermented into vinegar, the cool wood offering brief respite to your feverish brow, empathy deepening for the gravediggers toiling in mass pits outside the walls, their shovels thudding rhythmically like heartbeats of the damned, backs bent under the weight of endless burials where lime dust chokes their lungs in a sad irony of the living burying the dead only to join them soon, their tales whispered in taverns of ghosts rising from shallow graves to wander the night. The modern comparison strikes vividly. It's like binge-watching news during lockdown, where curves flatten, promises but spikes shatter hopes, isolation breeding bitterness that festers like untreated wounds, survivors emerging twisted by loss that no vaccine can heal. Zoom out poetically, and behold the realm as a festering wound upon the earth, cities pulsing with erratic life like fevered dreams, threads of bitterness knotting through the clammy veil in patterns of reluctant renewal, a delicate shroud where death's grip loosens, only to reveal scars that time may fade but never erase. Deep empathy stirs for the flagellants parading past, their whips cracking in self-flagellation as they chant repentance, backs bloody in a sad spectacle of faith twisted into masochism, their eyes wild with the same terror that gnaws at your core, a harmony of suffering where piety offers no shield against the reaper's indiscriminate scythe. Sarcasm bites sharper in the dimness, fortune twist cruelly indeed, sparing the rats while claiming the righteous, leaving you to ponder if survival is a gift or a curse in this lottery of the damned. The few who remain haunted by empty echoes in homes once filled with laughter, now silenced by absence. The twilight deepens outside, fog thickening to muffle the distant wails, your steps faltering as you emerge. The streets a maze of shadows where figures shuffle like spectres, a psychological chill burrowing despite the fever. What if this bitter survival is merely intermission in history's play? Fortune's cruel jest promising rebirth, but delivering only more clammy embraces. The horizon, a strange visual of deserted carts silhouetted against the dying light. Wheels frozen in eternal wait. You clash in civil strife's bloody embrace that engulfs the fog-wreathed fields like a smothering veil of betrayal. Did you know that during the Wars of the Roses from 1455 to 1487, over 50,000 Englishmen perished in a dynastic feud between Lancaster and York that turned kin against kin? Historians still arguing if this was a noble power struggle or a chaotic free-for-all, where opportunistic lords switched sides like fickle fans at a sports rivalry, leaving the common folk to bleed for badges of red and white roses that symbolise nothing but endless grudge matches. Thorns of kin betrayal prick deeper than steel as you thrust your pike forward in the misty dawn of Towton in 1461, the brambles snagging your leggings and drawing blood in shallow scratches that burn like accusations of divided loyalties. Your wet wool gambeson mutated now from plague-damp streets to a fog-soaked harness, stiffened by the chill Yorkshire air, clinging to your chest in sodden layers that chafe your ribs into raw stripes of irritation. The fabric absorbing the swirling mists into a clammy weight that drags at your swings and soaks through to numb your flesh. Worse than charging into a paintball war in a thrift store sweater during a downpour where every hit stings twice from the cold and the impact. The sensory struggle sharpening as mud sucks at your boots with each lunge. The ground a churned slurry of blood and earth that slips underfoot and sends you staggering. pain jolting through your ankles, twisted in the ruts carved by charging horses, the iron on your teeth mutating from inky residue into the coppery bite of blood welling from a split lip where a gauntleted fist grazed you in the melee, your tongue pressing against it as if tasting the forbidden fruit of fratricide that sours every breath in this fog-bound hell. The physical event erupts in chaos as Yorkist archers loose volleys into the Lancastrian lines, arrows whistling through the mist like invisible serpents that thud into shields and flesh alike, forcing you to lock arms with comrades whose banners flutter red in the gloom, yet doubt flickers as you spot a cousin across the field under white roses, his face twisted in the same grim determination that mirrors your own. The shocking element crashing down when a stray shaft pierces his thigh and he crumples with a howl lost to the din. Sad empathy overwhelming you for this bloodkin turned foe by the whims of distant thrones. Families fractured like the realm itself, where brothers arm against brothers in a sad spectacle of inherited hatred that leaves widows weeping in empty halls. A human toll buried under the weight of fractured realms, crushing spirits amid the swirling mists that hide the true cost of ambition. Sarcasm curls your lips amid the clamour. Oh, family reunions at their finest, where thorny disputes over inheritance escalate to hacking at each other with halberds. Worse than a Thanksgiving dinner gone wrong, where uncles argue politics and end up flipping the table. But here the stakes are heads rolling instead of just bruised egos, leaving you bitter at fortune's cruel jest that pits blood against blood for a crown no one truly wins. An absurd tidbit races through your adrenaline-fueled mind as you parry a blow medieval knights, sometimes wore padded codpieces stuffed with horsehair for protection. A quirky bulge that turned groin guards into comical targets in the fray. As ridiculous as donning bubble wrap for a bar fight because it cushions the blows while making you look like a fool. The fog thickens, mutating torchlight from distant campfires now, the pale dawn struggling through vapours into hazy veils that distort distances, making enemies loom suddenly like phantoms from nightmares. Your vision blurring from sweat stinging your eyes as you swing wildly at a shadow that resolves into a Yorkist footman, his poleaxe glancing off your shoulder in a burst of agony that numbs your arm, pain radiating like fire through veins as you retaliate with a thrust that bites deep, his gurgle fading into the mist's muffling embrace. A surprising twist revisits Alfred the Great from those swampy exiles, his unified kingdom now splintered by these rose wars that mock his laws with lawless butchery. Scholars pondering if the plague's depopulation sowed seeds of instability by upending feudal orders, where fewer peasants meant bolder demands that fueled baronial greed, much like economic crashes today sparking populist uprisings that topple old guards. You press forward, the line wavering as arrows slacken in the damp, empathy deepening for the conscripted yeomen beside you. Farmers yanked from ploughs to die for lords who view them as fodder, their faces pale with homesickness amid the carnage, a sad undercurrent where dreams of harvest rot in fields trampled by this endless strife. The modern comparison strikes it's like binge-watching a reality show where alliances flip weekly for the prize, but the drama turns deadly with real stakes, bitterness festering in eliminations that leave scars no confessional can heal. Zoom out poetically, and behold the field as a thorny tapestry of turmoil, mists swirling like veils over the damned, threads of kin betrayal knotting into patterns of perpetual pain, a delicate chaos where realms fracture under the weight of Rose's deceptive beauty. Deep empathy stirs for the fallen on both sides, their bodies entwined in death's indifferent embrace, a sad irony where shared blood spills to stain the earth equally, their last breaths mingling in the fog like forgotten pleas for peace. Sarcasm bites sharper in the haze. Civil war sounds civilized until you're knee-deep in the muck of it, thorns pricking each advance while the weight of grudges crushes any hope of mercy, leaving you to ponder if unity is a myth peddled by victors who rewrite the rose's bloody truth. The battle drags into afternoon, exhaustion pulling at your limbs as the fog lifts slightly, revealing the carnage in stark detail. Your breaths laboured in the cloying air, the swirling mists parting to unveil a landscape littered with the fallen, their forms a strange visual of twisted limbs and discarded banners, fluttering like surrender flags in the breeze. A psychological chill settling as you question if this thorny dance will ever end or merely mutate into new betrayals under the same fractured sky. You wander echoing halls as chivalry's ghosts fade into the creeping twilight that drapes the stone like a shroud of forgotten vows. Did you know that by 1485 the Battle of Bosworth Field ended the Wars of the Roses with Henry Tudor's unlikely victory over Richard III, uniting Lancaster and York in a marriage that birthed the Tudor dynasty and closed the medieval chapter? Historians still arguing if this was a masterstroke of fate or a bloody accident, where a king's lost horse and a misplaced crown turned the tide, like a high-stakes poker game where the underdog bluffs his way to the pot, only because the favourite draws a fatal card in the final hand. The dimming flames of fabled knights sputter in iron braziers mounted on walls etched with faded tapestries depicting jousts and quests now unravelling at the edges. Their colours bled to muted greys by time's indifferent wash. Your wet wool cloak mutated now from foggy battlefield damp to a threadbare remnant heavy with the dust of deserted corridors, clinging to your shoulders in loose folds that chafe your neck with the ghosts of old irritations, the fabric absorbing the musty chill of empty chambers into a whispering veil that brushes your skin like spectral fingers. Worse than exploring an abandoned mansion at dusk in a moth-eaten coat that carries the faint scent of lives long extinguished. The sensory struggle softening into a weary ache as your boots echo hollowly on flagstones worn smooth by centuries of armoured strides. Pain lingering faintly in your joints from battles past like echoes of thorns pricked in rose-strewn fields. The iron on your teeth mutating from coppery blood to the faint, rusty bite of disuse as you lick dry lips tasting the stale air of neglect. Your tongue pressing against it as if savouring the last remnants of an era's bitter aftertaste. The physical event unfolds in slow dissolution as you trace a hand along the cold stone, fingers brushing cobwebs that cling like fragile regrets. The halls of a once grand castle now silent save for the distant drip of water seeping through cracked ceilings. A surprising twist revisiting William the Conqueror from those harried northern wastes where his wrath scorched the earth. His legacy now fading in these Tudor dawn shadows as Henry VII consolidates power with calculated marriages and purges. Scholars pondering if the Plantagenet fall was inevitable from overreaching ambition or the cumulative weight of civil thorns that bled the realm dry. Much like corporate empires collapsing under internal scandals where founders' visions crumble to successors' pragmatism, you pause by a shattered lance propped in a corner, its splintered wood a relic of chivalric ideals that promised honour but delivered deceit. Empathy welling for the knights who charged under banners of glory, only to rot in unmarked graves. Their sad tales whispered in ballads that romanticize the gore while burying the human frailty beneath layers of myth. A quiet undercurrent where dreams of Camelot dissolve into the reality of Bosworth's mud, where Richard's cry for a horse echoed unmet, his hunchbacked form exaggerated by Tudor propaganda into villainy crumpling under Lancastrian steel in a final futile stand. Sarcasm murmurs softly in the dimness, oh, chivalry's grand finale, where armoured heroes fade like overplayed reruns, their codes of conduct twisted into excuses for slaughter. Worse than a faded superhero franchise where capes and codes give way to gritty reboots that expose the flaws beneath the shine, leaving you to chuckle bitterly at fortune's ironic twist that spares no legend from dust's embrace. An absurd tidbit drifts through the quiet as you finger a rusted gauntlet left on a table. Medieval tournaments sometimes featured frog-mouthed helmets designed to splinter lances safely, yet knights still died from wood shards piercing visors. A quirky flaw in the facade of glory as comical as safety features on extreme sports gear that fail spectacularly when push comes to shove. The halls lengthen into labyrinthine turns, torchlight from a single sconce mutated here from battlefield flares into a solitary flame guttering low, casting elongated shadows that stretch like accusing fingers across tapestries frayed by moth and neglect, flickering weakly against the encroaching dark. Your steps slowing as exhaustion tugs at your limbs, pain ebbing into a dull throb that reminds you of every clash survived, from Viking shores to rose-thorned fields. You emerge into a great hall where thrones sit empty, their carvings of lions and dragons worn smooth by absent hands. Empathy deepening for the ghosts of Plantagenets who schemed and fell in these very seats, their ambitions crumbling like the mortar between stones. A sad elegy where crown's weight crushed more souls than any battlefield. their legacies twisted by victors' pens into cautionary tales of hubris. The modern comparison whispers it's like binge-watching a Dynasty doc-series where rises and falls cycle predictably, yet the human drama hits home. Bitterness fading into reflection on how power's game changes players but never the rules, leaving survivors to inherit scarred boards, zoom out poetically, and behold the castle as a hollow shell of bygone eras, halls echoing with the faint sighs of history's winds, threads of strife settling like dust in quiet corners, a delicate repose where medieval tumults yield to dawn's tentative light, fragile yet enduring in memory's weave. Deep empathy stirs for the unnamed multitudes who toiled beyond these walls, peasants and serfs whose labours built the grandeur now fading. Their sad anonymity, a counterpoint to knightly fame, lives ground under the wheel of progress that rolled onward regardless. Sarcasm fades gently, knights' fables dim like stars at dawn, their armoured sheen tarnished by time's honest mirror, pondering if lessons of strife truly settle or merely hibernate, waiting for new thorns to prick. The flames sputter lower, shadows claiming the space as you sink onto a worn bench, the dimness enveloping like a blanket of oblivion, your breath slowing in the quiet where echoes die, a psychological chill easing into acceptance. What if chivalry's ghosts teach that glory is illusion? Lessons dusting your weary soul as the quiet dawn filters through cracked windows. The halls a strange visual of empty chairs arranged in silent council, fading into whispers of what once was. You linger in twilight chambers where the air hangs heavy with the dust of dismantled thrones. Did you know that in the wake of Bosworth, Henry Tudor's propagandists reshaped Richard III's image into a villainous hunchback through plays and portraits, erasing nuances of his rule to solidify the new dynasty? Historians still debating if this was masterful spin or desperate revisionism to legitimize a Welsh upstart's claim, like a political campaign airbrushing scandals to paint the opponent as a monster, while hiding your own skeletons in freshly dug graves. The fading echoes of chivalry reverberate softly off vaulted ceilings cracked by time's subtle siege, their whispers brushing your ears like the last sighs of armoured phantoms retreating into alcoves shadowed by cobwebs that drape like veils over forgotten armorial shields. Your wet wool mantle mutated now from thorny battlefield grime to a threadbare shroud softened by the settling dusk, clinging loosely to your frame in gentle folds that barely chafe anymore. The fabric absorbing the cooling evening mist into a whispering caress that soothes rather than irritates your weathered skin, like wrapping yourself in an old blanket during a power outage where the familiarity outweighs the frayed edges. The sensory struggle easing into a muted throb as your fingers trace the cool brass of a discarded helm lying on a windowsill, pain lingering faintly in your knuckles from grips on pikes long since splintered, the iron on your teeth mutating from coppery strife to the faint, dusty bite of antiquity as you exhale slowly, your tongue pressing against it as if savouring the patina of eras concluded, the quiet inviting reflection where battle's clamour fades to introspection's hush. The physical event unwinds in languid steps as you meander through the antechamber, the stone floor yielding subtly under your boots worn thin by journeys from Roman ruins to rose-strewn fields. A surprising twist revisiting Alfred the Great from those marshy exiles where his defiant spark ignited unity. His legacy now a distant flicker in Tudor tapestries that blend Saxon resilience with Norman rigour into a hybrid heraldry. Scholars pondering if Henry's rose-emblazoned banners truly healed the fractures or merely papered over them with velvet and gold, much like merger announcements in boardrooms where old rivals shake hands on camera but scheme in the shadows for the next coup. You pause by a narrow window slit, gazing out at the encroaching night where stars prick the velvet sky like jewels scattered from a toppled crown. Empathy welling for the unsung artisans who wove these walls' stories, the masons and weavers whose calloused hands built grandeur for lords who fell, their sad anonymity a quiet counterpoint to knightly ballads that glorify the sword while ignoring the chisel. A human undercurrent where the weight of history rests not on thrones but on the bent backs of the forgotten, their labours enduring in the very stones that outlast the strife. Sarcasm murmurs gently in the dimness. Oh, enduring legacy of knights, where fabled deeds dim to footnotes in dusty tomes, their armoured pomp reduced to museum curiosities gawked at by tourists who snap selfies with ghosts. Worse than a viral meme that flames bright then fizzles into obscurity, leaving you to chuckle softly at fortune's ironic fade that turns heroes into relics overnight. An absurd tidbit drifts through the stillness as you finger a rusted spur on the floor, medieval squire's once polished armour, with mixtures of vinegar and sand, a quirky shine that warded rust but couldn't prevent the inevitable tarnish of time. As peculiar as buffing vintage cars with cola to remove grime, a temporary gloss on machines destined for the scrapyard. The chambers grow quieter, the fading flames in a lone hearth mutated here from battlefield blazes into a solitary glow that warms without scorching, casting soft amber pools that lap at the edges of darkness, flickering lazily, your breath sinking with the subtle crackle as exhaustion invites you to a velvet-cushioned bench worn by absent courtiers, pain ebbing from your limbs into a distant hum like the last vibrations of a struck bell. You settle there, the air stirring faintly with draughts that carry whispers of past councils where kings schemed and fell, empathy deepening for the women of these halls, the queens and ladies like Eleanor or Margaret, who navigated thorns with wit sharper than daggers, their sad influences often erased by male chroniclers who favoured swords over subtlety, a quiet harmony where their threads weave unseen through the fabric of fate. The modern comparison settles softly. It's like binge-watching historical dramas where side characters steal the show, bitterness fading into appreciation for the unsung roles that shape the plot, without claiming the spotlight, leaving survivors to inherit a narrative richer for the layers. Zoom out poetically, and behold the castle as a slumbering sentinel of bygone tempests, halls breathing in rhythmic repose amid the night's embrace, threads of lessons settling like dew on ancient sills, a delicate tapestry where strife's echoes harmonize into wisdom's lullaby. Deep empathy stirs for the pages turned, the lives expended in quests that birthed nations from chaos, a sad beauty in the cycle where endings birth beginnings, their weight lifting as twilight claims the space. Sarcasm softens to a whisper, fables of valor fade like dreams at dawn, their shine dulled by reality's honest light, pondering if history's ghosts teach humility or merely amuse with their antique follies. The flames dwindle to embers, shadows embracing the room in velvet quiet, your eyelids drooping as the halls hush to silence, a psychological chill dissolving into peaceful surrender. What if these dimming tales are bridges to tomorrow, lessons etched in fading ink that guide without demanding? The chamber's a strange visual of moonlight filtering through latticed windows, painting silver patterns on the floor like invitations to dream. You pause in shadowed alcoves where the weight of faded banners sags like weary shoulders, burdened by centuries of unkept oaths. Did you know that in the early Tudor courts of the late 1480s, Henry VII employed Italian bankers and Flemish artists to polish his regime's image, importing Renaissance sparks that subtly shifted England from medieval gloom to enlightened intrigue? Historians still arguing whether this was a genuine cultural dawn or a cynical facade to mask the blood-stained foundations of his throne. Like a startup rebranding after a scandal, by hiring influencers to gloss over the lawsuits, while the old skeletons rattle in the closet, the dimming flames flicker uncertainly in wall niches lined with soot from long-extinguished feasts, their light casting tremulous patterns on tapestries where lions and unicorns entwine in eternal chase, now frayed to ghostly outlines. Your wet wool surcoat, mutated now from misty battlefield, cling to a gossamer veil softened by the settling dust of disuse, draping your form in loose whispers that barely brush your skin with the echo of past chafes, the fabric absorbing the faint must of moth-eaten velvet into a gentle shroud that cradles rather than confines, like slipping into an heirloom robe during a quiet evening where memories comfort more than they constrain, the air turning milder with hints of beeswax from sputtering candles that evoke old vigils, the sensory struggle dissolving into a subtle hum as your fingers trail along oak panels carved with heraldic beasts, whose eyes seem to follow you in silent query. Pain receding from your limbs into a distant murmur like the last ripples of a stone skipped across a still pond. The iron on your teeth, mutating from bitter strife to the subtle patina of aged wine lingering on your palate, your tongue savouring the mellow edge as if history's flavours have mellowed with time's passage. The physical event meanders in hushed revelation as you discover a hidden alcove behind a loose panel, its hinges creaking like a sigh from the past, revealing a forgotten coffer of letters yellowed by age, their seals cracked like promises unfulfilled, compelling you to sift through parchments where inked words recount private laments of knights who questioned their quests, a surprising twist revisiting Simon de Montfort from those provision-bound rebellions where his parliamentary dreams flickered briefly. His ideals now echoed in Tudor's calculated assemblies that blend baronial checks with royal cunning. Scholars pondering if Henry's convocations were true evolutions of de Montfort's vision or mere tools to consolidate power under a rose-tinted crown. Much like policy wonks today, repurposing old manifestos for new elections while claiming innovation amid recycled rhetoric. You unfold a missive stained with what might be tears or spilled ink, the air stirring faintly with a phantom scent of sealing wax that battles the encroaching chill. Empathy welling for the anonymous scribe who penned doubts about chivalric codes that glorified slaughter while ignoring the widows left in wake. Their sad confessions a quiet undercurrent where valor's shine hides the tarnish of regret, a human frailty buried in the folds of history's grand narratives that now unfold in your hands like fragile petals preserved against the odds. Sarcasm tiptoes softly through the stillness. Oh, knightly nobility at its twilight, where fabled deeds unravel to reveal the strings pulled by puppet masters in velvet, their armoured pomp dimming like a stage light after the curtain call. Worse than a blockbuster sequel that promises epic returns, but delivers recycled plots and fading stars, leaving you to smirk at fortune's gentle jest that strips the gloss from legends. An absurd tidbit surfaces as you decipher a note about squires once using pigeon blood to dye banners crimson for luck, a quirky superstition that turned avian auguries into symbolic splatters, as peculiar as modern athletes wearing lucky socks soaked in energy drinks for that extra edge, their rituals blending folly with fervent belief. The alcove's seclusion deepens, the fading flames from the hall beyond mutated here from vigilant beacons into a solitary glow seeping through cracks, casting elongated wisps that dance lazily across the letters, flickering with the rhythm of your steadying breath. Your steps pausing as you absorb the words that bridge eras, pain from old wounds now a faint echo that harmonizes with the chamber's quiet repose. You tuck the letters away, the air whispering secrets of transitions where medieval tumults yield to Renaissance whispers, empathy deepening for the transitional souls caught between worlds, the scholars and artists who bridge the gap, their sad innovations often credited to kings while they toiled in obscurity, a quiet harmony where progress steps on the shoulders of the unsung. The modern comparison settles like dusk. It's like updating an old app where the interface shines new but the bugs linger beneath. Bitterness easing into acceptance that evolution recycles the old into something enduring, leaving survivors to navigate the upgraded maze with wary wonder. Zoom out poetically and behold the alcove as a cocoon of contemplation, walls enclosing the hush of history's pause, threads of legacy intertwining in subtle patterns that glow within a light, a delicate interlude where strife's remnants dissolve into wisdom's ether. Deep empathy stirs for the page's authors, their weight lifting as insights bloom in the dim, a sad beauty in their anonymous gifts that outlast the clamour. Sarcasm fades to a murmur, fables unwind like threads from a loom, their shine softened by perspective's gentle hand. Pondering if echoes teach more in silence than in thunder. The light wanes further, shadows embracing the space in tender folds, your form relaxing against the wall as the alcove blurs into serenity, a psychological chill warming into peaceful drift. What if these fading whispers are the true inheritance? Lessons blooming in quiet gardens where thorns no longer prick. The alcove, a strange visual of moonlight slanting through a high grille, painting silver filigrees on the floor like invitations to eternal repose. As the halls dissolve into softer outlines, your steps grow languid, the stone beneath your feet smoothing into a gentle path that winds through fading memories, torchlight dimming to a warm ember's glow that caresses rather than pierces, wet wool lightening as if burdens lift with each exhaled breath, the air turning crisp and clean like morning dew on forgotten meadows. You feel the iron's bite soften on your tongue, mutating into the subtle sweetness of closure, sensory motifs retreating like old friends bidding farewell. The chafing eases into a soothing wrap that cradles your form in quiet repose. Shadows lengthen but lose their menace, stretching into long, the lazy forms that invite rest rather than dread. The castle's echoes hush to murmurs of wind through open arches, empty chairs gathering dust in serene silence, halls emptying of ghosts as they drift into the ether like leaves on an autumn breeze. Your eyelids grow heavy, the weight of centuries lifting as lessons settle deep within. A gentle metaphor of rivers finding sea after turbulent flows, strife's thorns blunting into petals that scatter softly. Breathe slower now. Let the environment fade, fading torchlight to starlit whispers, soft breathing sinking with the night's rhythm, silent halls embracing solitude, empty chairs waiting for dawn's first light. And in this quiet unravelling, history whispers its final secret.